Yo, I am here again. This is another Sunday update stream. I am doing Windows updates, server updates for my organization. In the background over here, I'm almost done. I'm down to my last couple of rather tedious servers. I've got about an hour left before I run out of time. With my maintenance window. It's now 5 p.m. I've already extended that time. Used to go until 4, now it goes until 6 because I run into problems this time of day. The stuff I'm working on now isn't going to affect anybody in the organization, and so it doesn't really matter. But I don't want to spend the entire day getting it done. Like I said, it's already 5 o'clock. I'd like to cut the grass today. It's been kind of wet. Probably not going to happen. But since I am here killing time, I am going to do a little stream here. Do a little dance. Make a little love. Get down tonight. To talk about a couple of things that have been irritating me and have made me want to stay off Facebook for the last week or so. Particularly my personal Facebook, because there are lots of people who drive me nuts. The world nowadays makes me sad that people have lost the ability to have positions that are not an extreme one way or the other. Very left, very right. It just drives me bonkers that there can't be a nuanced position in between what people are willing to stand their ground on. Here's where I'll stand my ground on something, okay? Accusations of anything are insufficient. For anything, for anybody. They may be cause for concern. They may be cause for investigation. But if there's not, people aren't willing to be investigated or to have their claims verified, I don't care. This, of course, much of it is in relation to the Brett Kavanaugh nomination to the Supreme Court. How do I phrase this accurately? I'm not in favor of Kavanaugh's appointment to the court. His ascension to the court at this point. He's been sworn in and everything in a private ceremony. He's not the justice I would have wanted. By a long shot. He said some very nice things. Things that I appreciated as a liberal leftist in his interview in front of the Senate Select Committee. Not the least of which being that when he was appointed to a federal judgeship, he decided that in the interest of being less partisan, that he would stop voting. And he claims to have not voted in the last 10 or 12 years or something like that. I actually think that's pretty cool. I don't know that that is exactly the case, that is what he's still doing. But I will say that that's pretty cool. I mean, that's in the interest of appearing less partisan. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not unswearing an allegiance to a political ideology, but it is certainly taking a step away from the active membership, which, okay, cool. Dr. Ford, with her testimony that he sexually assaulted her back in the 80s, 82, I think it was. I have some questions and concerns with that. Not the least of which being that this type of accusation directly seems the type of accusation that would play directly to the people who oppose Brett Kavanaugh. Not the things that would. It's not a charge against him that would appeal to supporters of him. Something that would lean more in that direction is his questionable financial transactions from a couple of years ago, where he was 1 year he was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I think it was $130,000. Most of it going to baseball tickets or something like that. I don't remember. It's back when his name was first floated for this. I don't remember exactly. But as a federal judge, he every year has to file paperwork for his debts and incomes or whatever. And the one year he had this massive debt listed on his forms, and the next year it wasn't there anymore. And I believe it's anything under $6,000 debt-wise doesn't have to be recorded or something like that. I don't remember the thresholds. I'm just saying. Obviously, he was able to manage that debt, and that's fine. That seems a little shakier, and something like financial malfeasance is something that would certainly play more towards the Republican or the conservative, the right-wing side of the argument, as opposed to whether or not he engaged in activity that would be considered problematic now. From what I know of memory and cognition, from my brief stint in psychology, the type of stuff that she remembers doesn't seem to be the type of stuff that you would remember from a traumatic experience. Traumatic memory recall is not going to be perfect because adrenal stresses cause certain types of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Certain types of focus. If you're being attacked, for example, in a street fight, for example, let's say a guy comes up and tries to attack you. The things that you remember about the attack are the type of clothing they're wearing, maybe not necessarily the color, but whether or not it was flowing or long or tight, or you remember the placement of their hands. You remember things like if they were holding something, if they were taller and had a longer reach. You might not necessarily remember what they looked like. You may not be able to see their face because that's not the thing that you'd be focusing on. You'd be focusing on the points of attack that are most likely to cause you harm. You'll notice if there's more people around, if they're acting in concert with the person, that type of stuff. You may not remember exactly where it happened. You may not remember exactly how you got away. You may not remember exactly, the stuff leading up to that event because you became so much of your cognitive faculties became involved in this particular incident that the stuff that was in your short-term memory could possibly get dumped and in favor of this hyper-focus at that particular time. So stuff like her not knowing how she got to the party or how she got home or where she went when she got away makes perfect sense. I'm also but things like knowing 100% certain that it was Brett, who I keep seeing this. Did she know him beforehand? I'm under the impression that she didn't go to the same school he did. Or if she did, she had just started going there. Like, I'm trying to figure out how this... I keep seeing people saying things like, well, if, you were attacked by someone you knew, you would most certainly remember that. But I don't remember that. I don't remember seeing that anywhere in the story. The fact is that she didn't have any memory or tell anybody about this until 2012 at all. So 30 years or so passes without mentioning the person's name or that it happened to her. And she may have been suffering trauma. She may have been having problems with it. It may have been something else. It may have been, after 29 years, it could be a misplaced memory of some kind. I don't know. I've heard people talk about it being a recovered memory. I think if it was a recovered memory, there'd have been more story around that instead of just a couple people on Twitter saying something about a recovered memory. Recovered memory is shit, by the way. Unless you are working with somebody who is explicitly trained in not providing bias stimulation to the process, it's questionable at best. Alien abductions a perfect example of that. The whole satanic panic in the late 80s, early 90s is another good example of that. It really just... I'm not going to make an argument about whether or not she should have come forward or not. I think that if it was important enough to her that this was something that really should have been taken care of, she should have come forward sooner instead of waiting until saving it like an ace in the hole. Her actions make me more suspect of her recollection of the incident than anything that she actually said. The circumstances surrounding it have me questioning it. Be that as it may, I still don't like Kavanaugh. I still don't think he's the right justice. I think that this boils down to partisan bickering, and I don't want to, like, the other accusations against him. They don't. I mean, whether or not they're credible, I think is irrelevant to whether or not this means that he should be a Supreme Court justice. There are other issues that I think clearly would indicate that he isn't necessarily the candidate that I would want there. I can only hope that he ends up being more of a Roberts Republican or more of a Roberts conservative than a Scalia. I get the feeling that he's going to be more of a Scalia than a Roberts or a Stevens. So we'll see. We really have no choice at this point. I will talk about Jordan Peterson's tweet about this briefly, because that was rather... Like, I totally understand what he's saying. Because Kavanaugh being in the Supreme Court with this much vitriol against him does further stir the pot. It does further this narrative of oppression and violence against their... I don't know what else. I mean, without going off and sounding like some... without sounding like I'm trolling social justice advocates or their language or intersectionality. I'm not gonna. I don't need to do that. But I think that it's just... I don't like him on his positions and his stances. I appreciate the fact that he says that Roe v. Wade is settled case law, with Roe v. Wade and Casey, I think it was Casey, being the two precedents that it would be tough to walk back on. At the same time, he has made statements that made it clear that he didn't think that the law part of that was all that strong, which would give him room for overturning. I think that if he can get past his first year of cases, this first term, and not look like a complete partisan hack, I think that some of that vitriol will back off, and people may be a little more reasonable. I hope he's a more reasonable guy than what he sounds like, but I don't know that's actually the case. Jordan Peterson's tweet about that. Let me pull up that here. And let me pull this over here so I know what we're looking at, because I've got this on. Boop. Why does that have... Oh, there we go. There I am. There I am. Okay, so we've got this tweet here by JBP. The series of tweets here. Let's look at this one in particular. I believe if confirmed, then Kavanaugh would be vindicated and could preserve his reputation. I understand the damage that has been done to him, perhaps better than most, but by withdrawing, he could effectively deprive his more radical opponents of their self-righteous moralism. I don't disagree with that. I think that's a very good point, and I don't want to come... As someone who's on the left, I don't want to I don't want anyone to think that I'm favoring this idea by Jordan just to get him out of there. I think that Jordan is right that I think that it would help in the balance of things. It certainly wouldn't be better for Kavanaugh. It would not be better for Trump, which, by the way, I think that Trump is in real trouble now that Kavanaugh has been appointed. Now that Trump has his conservative justice, conservative, because they're all nonpartisan, of course, his constitutionalist justice, I think he's in trouble. And I think he's in trouble because really the Republicans have wanted to get a Supreme Court justice stacked in their favor for many, many years. Trump is in office. Trump has managed to do that. Now there's very little to prevent. There's very little motivation for mainline Republicans who are fed up with him and his tactics and his behaviors and how it's furthering the divide between the left and the right and how they're losing some of these middle ground voters. The blue wave that is going to come in November, which is entirely likely, is going to scare them. And I don't think they're going to stand behind as much preventing any kind of impeachment proceedings. Getting this appointment is good for them, but now they can be done. I think if any kind of impeachment is going to happen, it's going to happen sooner than later. Now that they have their justice, they have their Supreme Court, and that will last them for years. I'm not saying that Trump is going to be impeached now that Kavanaugh's been seated. What I'm saying, though, is that the motivation to prevent an impeachment proceeding from going forward is much less now that conservatives have their stacked court. Because Pence can move in. Pence is still, Republican. He's certainly more mainline Republican. I don't know that there's sufficient grounds to impeach Trump. As much as I don't like the guy, I think that we'd be hard-pressed to necessarily find a sufficient condition to impeach him. But I think that one of the big hurdles to that impeachment has been crossed. Now that they have seated their justice. Because once those procedures start, anything that Trump does is poisoned. So if he was under impeachment and he appointed a justice, then he's done. That person won't get nominated because, well, he's being impeached. Or he's being investigated. Who knows what's going to come out of the Mueller probe? They seem to be wrapping up. Coincidental timing to some extent. Maybe they'll find something, maybe they won't. I don't know I can't remember the full scope of their investigation at this point, but who knows how that'll work out. So I agree with Jordan in the principle of another good point here by Jordan, that this thing would necessarily it would take away a lot of the bite of the divide, but it would, and this is a very good point here, that it might decrease. Well, it might hand a victory to the believe all accusers kind of thing. Kavanaugh would have to make it clear if he stepped down that he was doing it because his nomination was so polarizing, and they didn't think that was best for the country. I don't see him doing that at all. I don't see him in any way walking away from this position, which has probably been a dream of his. As a kid, he probably wanted to run for president. Then he decided to be a lawyer. And then he wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. Well, guess what? You got it there, buddy. Good job. Hope your room is clean. Which it isn't, obviously, because the whole Ford thing. His drunken antics might have been more of an issue, especially post-college. Could have been more of an issue for both sides than sexual assault, which I'm still not clear as to what the assault part was, other than there was a claim of groping, but not specifically groping what. I have my own take on groping, which some people will disagree with, which is basically that boobs and butts aren't groping. Grabbing genitals is, because those are directly sexual connotated things. Women breastfeeding in public is not a sexual act. Boobs are not sex objects, if you will. We shouldn't treat them that way, and we shouldn't give women special priority to that. If a woman came up and put her hand on my chest, I would not think that was sexual harassment. And I think that the law should be applied equally to both sexes, and I think that would be how I'd prefer things to happen. Not necessarily how it would happen, but we want what we want. My want is for actual equality. Let's see here. My face looks a little pudgy today. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. That's pretty much my take on the Kavanaugh thing. I hope he's a better judge than what I suspect he's going to be. But we'll have to see how that works out, because frankly, we don't have a choice at this point. There is very little we could do at this point. If Ford is not willing to press charges, or none of the other accusers are willing to press charges that are credible, that can be investigated, that could lead to a conviction, you're honestly wasting your time to come forward with this stuff. Coming forward with it is seeking vengeance and not justice. Seeking justice is to go to the police and to report these things and have them improperly investigated. Seeking vengeance is attempting to ruin people's reputations, which is... It was... I don't remember the source, but it is related to one of the books that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, which I don't have them written down here, but we'll talk about it in a minute. One of the differences between how men and women settle conflict: men tend to be more physical, women tend to be more into the social reputation smearing kind of thing. And that could very well be related to the fact that women are more social, and dividing them amongst in-groups is far more damaging to each other than punching them in the face. And because women tend to be smaller than men, and men tend to be larger and stronger, the larger and stronger men, are more likely to fight because they can, and women can't fight necessarily as well against that, and so they choose other means to fight back. And that may be... This, to me, is clearly that type of... I don't want to say clearly that type of thing, but it seems fairly obvious that coming forward with these types of accusations against Kavanaugh is that type of thing. It is not, I went to the police and had, the physical restraints of law placed on him. It is more the social reputation damaging activity. Which, again, makes me question the validity of the claims that she's making. I don't think that she's making any claims that can't be in some way verified, or at least tangentially shown to be plausible. But at the same time, I don't know that it's actually true. And without a proper investigation, there's no way for me to actually know that. And I'm not going to believe somebody just because they said so, any more than I'm going to believe that someone says that God is real and therefore believe in God. So, I don't do that either. Books. Yes, I have 3 new books that I have to read. They're on my reading list because I have not yet finished Howard Zinn's What's Howard Zinn's book that I'm reading? It's a history book. I gotta Google it. It's something about America. People's history of the United States. That's it. People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. I am reading that. It's an 840-some page book, and I am in chapter 2. I had talked about doing a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of it. I may do that because I need content. The problem is I don't have time for content. Although, I guess if I'm going to spend an hour streaming, I'm probably okay doing content that way. But I'll say that he makes it clear in the first chapter, or I don't know if it's first chapter introduction, that this isn't, that his goal with this book is to tell history from the position of those that are most adversely affected by the things. I have to say, though, that he's not so critical of his own sourcing to do that. He seems more than fine with discrediting Columbus, for example, which is where he starts with the discovery of America. With Columbus and the things that happened in Hispaniola. But he's not at all critical of his detractors writing at the time about his poor treatment of the natives. And I don't doubt that there was a lot of bad stuff that happened in Hispaniola when he first landed and treated the people like, I would say, like the Spanish aristocracy he was used to. The merchant class, wealthy class, and how they treated the lower classes, or what they might call savages. I find it hard to reconcile the idea that Columbus would have exaggerated the fact that gold was everywhere. It was scattered across fields, and with the idea that we know he lied about that. And he brought back samples of gold and some natives and things like that to Spain. But somehow we were to trust his idea that there were, his estimates, 6 million people in Hispaniola. Because by the time the Franciscan monk, I can't remember his name, came with the third trip, I think, to Hispaniola, he estimated something like 90% of the population of the island had been killed. Which, how do you bury that many people? How do you have time with the ever-dwindling populations to bury that many people? I'm sure that there were probably some very hard work done in mines, and that the people were conscripted to do so. Enslaved, possibly paid, possibly, I don't know the scenario, because Columbus didn't necessarily talk about it, and his detractors, I feel, exaggerated. I feel would be just as likely to exaggerate how bad it was based on misunderstandings or dislike of Columbus, for example. I don't think Columbus was necessarily the best person to manage the island, but I don't know that he was the monster that he is sometimes portrayed to be, particularly in this book. Having said that, I may go through and read it. I hate writing in books, so I'll have to make some notes and go through it, but I'll have to reread chapter 1. I'm into chapter 2, and the idea is to tell the story from, like, in this case, from the eyes of the natives that were on the island when Columbus was there. To tell the story of the Civil War from the eyes of black slaves, to that type of thing. Tell the story of the French and Indian War from the perspective of the Indians. I don't know. He had a whole list of, I want to tell history from, and then you pick the worst possible person in this, and you tell their story, which is fine, but I can't imagine that the surviving records are any more accurate than those of the victors who whitewash some of the stuff. He even complains that some of these other historians that talk about this stuff, that have written books on this stuff, mention these things but don't dwell on them. It's probably because how much you need to dwell on the atrocity of black slavery, or just slavery in general in the Americas. It's bad and it happened, and if you're writing a book about the history of, say, Alabama from 1800 to 1860, a lot of that is driven by slave labor, but that's not the things that happened. It's much like, it certainly influenced the events to some extent, but if you're spending time talking about, slave revolts or economic progress or whatever, revisiting the horrors of slavery is not necessarily telling the story. It's you're providing this background for it, and then you're explaining the things that happen on top of these things, dragging yourself back into the muck that you're treading over. Doesn't get the whole story out there. It focuses on just the bad stuff, which is understandable, but a people's history of the United States is that story. It's the story of all the muck and the mire and the bad stuff, and we'll have to I'll have to, at some point I'll go through it, and we'll talk about it chapter by chapter, given having any time ever. I have 0 viewers, which is fine, except for the fact that I normally have at least one, which is usually me. Why do I have 0 viewers? It says I'm live. I have 32 minutes into the stream, but I have 0 people watching. And that's fine. Whatever. But my new books that I'm going to partake in reading are all books that, at one point or another, were recommended by Adam Friended. Also, that's his channel name. He goes by Adam. He also runs Think Club. Him and I have had some discussions about some things in the past regarding religion. He's let me do this way. Adam, listen to me very carefully, if you will. This 2 minutes here is just for you. Okay? Calm down, dude. All right? Stop telling anti-theists what they think. Talk about what they say and refute that. Every time I watch a video of you talking about what somebody said, including all of your recent rationality rules things, you're off the wall. You take a 3-second clip, and then you spend all this time talking about what he thinks instead of talking about what he says. His first video to you was pretty okay. I agreed with some of his criticisms. I have not seen a response of yours that was very coherent to the things that he was criticizing you for. Be that as it may, it's your content, you can do whatever you want. But understand that when you talk about post hoc reasoning, there is a lot of that with a lot of people, a lot of times, including Jordan Peterson and most of his, and your position that because religion is old, that it has served some purpose, that it is necessary. And finding your justifications to prove that are literally post hoc reasoning. It has been this way, we have this thing, and therefore it must be okay. That's not, it's not a logical fallacy. You're right. But strawmanning people's positions by telling them what they think is. Which was my criticism of you with the whole Matt Dillahunty video that I first got on you about, was you kept saying what Matt thinks. You don't know what Matt thinks. Tell me what Matt says. Show me what Matt says. Show me the clip where Matt says this, and then Jordan says this, which eviscerates that. Instead, when you make these videos, you put these clips in of a talk, and you say, these anti-theists think this. They think this. They keep thinking, they think this, and they're going to do this, and this is what they think. Tell me what they say. Say. You're not a mind reader. I'm not a mind reader. I can't read what their minds are. I can't tell what their minds are. Even though I look a lot like Matt Dillahunty, I'm not Matt Dillahunty, and I cannot tell you what is inside of his head. Neither can you. And so I don't say Matt thinks. I don't say Jordan Peterson thinks. I don't say theists think. I don't say SJWs think. I say what they say. I refute that and I talk about that. Okay. That's it. Adam, I'm done. I still watch your content, although sometimes I get irritated with not the thumbnails as much as the titles. Be that as it may, the 3 books that I have to read per Adam's recommendations are one. The first one I actually bought for my wife, but I told her when she was done reading it, I wanted to read it. It is Why Gender Matters. And that is by click on the link here. By Leonard Sachs, MD, PhD. What parents and teachers need to know about the emerging science of sex differences. Second edition, $13.99. I think I paid less than that. I'm a physical book reader. I'd love to do audiobooks, but I have too much other content to watch and keep up with. But this should be a fairly easy read. It's not a long book. I agree with some of the stuff that's in the book without having read it, having just watched clips from the audiobook in videos from Adam. But I thought it was an important thing to read to understand differences, especially in some of the things that I've heard my wife say about to my boys. I have 2 boys, about how to handle conflicts and things like that. And I want to teach them better socialization. I don't want to teach them how to socialize in one particular way, which is favored in schools. So I'm hoping that she gets through that fairly well, but I don't know for sure. The other book that I bought was, which I've actually started, is Jonathan Haidt. What's his famous book? IDT. The Righteous Mind. Oh man, I could have got it for... All right, Amazon. Damn you. I got it from paperback for $11 from Amazon. And instead, I paid like $17 on Amazon for it. But anyway, The Righteous Mind. I'm in chapter 2 of that one as well. I want to say I just started chapter 2. I just finished chapter 1. However that worked out. I already have an issue or 2 with his methodologies, which I had going into this because I had again watched a lot of stuff from Adam, from Friended Forever, atheist. Too hard to say. Glad you changed that. But I don't think that the results that he gets out of it are wrong per se. I think they could be better. I do have some issues with, like, one of the issues that I have with the methodology of his study is allowing people to choose their own labels and then answer questions about how they think about things. The term liberal is poisoned, if you will, by culture and society. Progressives tend to take on the label of liberal more readily than actual liberals do. There are plenty of Republicans who are liberals. The whole libertarian thing, which tends to be center-right, they tend to be liberal. And they'll call themselves liberal, but they don't always want to call themselves liberal because as they have the term libertarian they can fall back on. And liberal tends to be favored by the left, and it has been abused that way since Nixon. And it hasn't always been misapplied, I'll say that. But now, in the last 10 years or so, it has been misapplied quite often. Because the progress we were trying to make before, which was to get people to be treated the same, to give people the same freedoms and the same abilities. It's a liberal idea to allow women to work and to allow women to vote and to allow the gays to marry and all this other kind of stuff. Those are permissive things that we were trying to apply to people. They were liberating. They were part of the concept of liberty, which is where liberal comes from. They share the same Libra root, which is about permissiveness and freedom. Progressivism is trying to push things forward. And for quite a while, progressivism and liberalism were synonymous because they were striving to progress to this point of equality. Progressivism is splintering off and has been for many years. Probably actually since 9/11. Progressivism has begun to splinter off as these liberal things became achieved. Their righteous ideology, righteous quote fingers, forced them to move forward ever more. And so they proceeded to move forward. Whether that was good or bad is entirely up to your perspective. But a lot of people, a lot of centrists, a lot of conservatives would say that liberal is some pejorative term, and I still see it now, and I want to punch all of my Republican-leaning family members on Facebook. I want to punch them in the face when they say stuff like liberals want this, and what they're talking about are progressives, because the ideologies are different. One is about allowing people to do whatever the hell they want, or whatever. Based on whatever they want, they're free to make those choices, as opposed to pushing forward to a grand utopia. Progressives tend to be on the left. They tend to be ideologically left. They tend to associate extra agency with things, which goes back to my whole left-right. People on the left tend to have type 1 errors, favor type 1 errors. People on the right tend to favor type 2 errors in their cognitive thinkings, associating more with righteousness versus agency. Is that my left? I can't tell. This is my left hand, so it's probably on your right. But the left, we'll do it this way. The left, as it looks on the camera, the left has a tendency to favor agency, and the right tends to favor principle, if you will. These people are more about wanting things to be fair, and so everybody should be treated, everybody should have the same rules. And these are people who all want everyone to understand that everybody has feelings, basically. And so there's a conflict between how those things break out. I had done a video a while back about explaining that. I haven't gotten around to doing anything more formal or showing my evidence for it, or my reasoning for it, if you will. But that's where I'm at for there. This is getting on pretty long. I'm gonna do one more thing. The third book I have is actually one that Adam and I were arguing about the other day, which it just came in. It is, God, what was it called? I know what I'll do. I go to here, and I'll go, because I got it on here. Here we go. Sacred and Secular, Religion and Politics Worldwide, Cambridge Studies and Social Theory, Religion and Politics, 2nd edition. I got a former library book, so it was like $11. This is one that Adam and I argued about, and one that we basically had a discussion that was centered on the idea that there's only correlation here, not causation. And Adam was under the impression, or is under the impression, that scientific studies, especially in the social sciences, are trying to know whether their findings show causation. And I tried to explain to him that causation and showing causation in studies is few and far between, especially in the social sciences. It's about correlation. It's about finding things that work together and trying to stack them up so that you can find some kind of causation. But the studies themselves typically don't actually show any causation. This was with regards to, in particular, things like a concept that came from this book, which was, what was it called? Some kind of security. I can't remember what the name of the thing was. Damn it. So we have it's listed here. Existential security. So the idea is about existential security and how religion provides existential security for people. And I was pointing out, I think rightly, that if religion provided existential security, then you would find high existential security in places that are highly religious, and you don't find that. Places that are highly religious tend to have very low existential security. There are people in those cultures that have higher existential security when they are more religious, but overall the society does not, that is more religious, doesn't find more existential security that way. You tend to find more existential security in places where you have more actual security, in things like the Scandinavian countries, in Sweden and Denmark and places like that, where there's strong social safety nets and low religiosity. And there is probably a correlation between those two things. I will not sit here and say it's causal, even if I want to, because there was recently a study that came out, which we're going to go over here and look at, and I'm going to go to this one and talk about here. Religious change precedes economic change in the 20th century. There's a meta-analysis of the last 100 years or so, looking at the secularization of different nations, and seeing how they compared to their economic growth to their reduction in religiosity. I can think of a very good reason why this happened. And let's look at this one here. And how becoming less religious actually leads to economic prosperity. My own personal theory, which I don't think is necessarily touched on in this paper here, but basically what it looks like, according to this, is that preceding economic growth in these countries, you had things where the countries themselves were doing well enough that religiosity dropped, and then as religiosity dropped, you saw growth or expansion in the economies and social structures of these countries. I think the simple answer to that is they had more money. People giving less to the church mean they had more disposable income, which means that they can stimulate their own economy and they can bring about higher taxes or more government incomes and allow them for more social safety nets and bring about actual security as opposed to just the feeling of existential security. That's my simple explanation for it, and it makes sense to some extent. I don't think that that's proposed in the work here. You know what? I'm going to link this story on it from the World Economic Forum. Here, over to here. This one, and this one, which is a little more of the detailed charts and graphs and whatever. This story here was talking more about the big picture stuff, it only includes a couple of the graphs. It's much shorter. It's easier to digest. I think it gets the gist of the other one. But I think that's... Put this one in here too, not that window. This one. I got too many windows open. I'm a big tab person. It's something that Adam and I have in common. God, I feel like I'm talking... I feel like Adam's living in my head right now. Get out of my head. He's a prolific content writer, maker. He does have good content, and I do watch a lot of it. So, Kavanaugh. I hope I spelled Kavanaugh right. So there. This is religion. Drop. Precedes. That's not spelled right. Precedes. Increase in economic strength. It's not just growth. So there we go. Put that in the description there. And that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about today. It was very interesting, these things. They had their methodologies for how they did all that work. Good article. They even talk about something that I agree with Durkheim on. I disagree with Durkheim's definition of religion as being too broad. I don't think he's wrong. I just don't think that it's enough. But this is something that he proposed that technological and socioeconomic advances come to displace the function of religion. Where Weber thinks that that one fed the other, and I think that they can both be right. But I think that what this particular analysis by Damien Ruck, Alexander Bentley, and Daniel J. Lawson, along with other authors and affiliations, seems to indicate is that, we kind of get better, and sometimes we need to think more clearly or have better ideas before those ideas can grow exponentially, socially, and I don't know, I'm rambling at this point. I've had enough coffee. I need to go have dinner, finish up my updates, which are almost done. And I really haven't worked on too much while we were doing the stream here. Boop. But they should be just about completed anyway. I was waiting on stuff for the longest time. So, I guess that's it. I don't have a whole lot else. I'm, like I said, I listed those in the description. This was not, it's not well planned. Hopefully I can stop talking about Adam in the next couple of streams. Although, like I said, I am reading a couple of books that he suggested. Although I will admit that the only reason I bought The Righteous Mind is because Dawkins was gushing about it. And not that I'm necessarily a huge fan of Dawkins. In fact, I would even say that I probably at this point, while I agree with Dawkins on religion and things like that, I think that as far as who is more important to me right now, it might even be Jonathan Haidt. Because I think that's his take on things is more relevant to the current. I don't know that there's anything wrong with any of it, but who knows what I'm talking about. My Sunday mug, in case anybody ever wondered, I drink my coffee out of this on Sundays. That's it. Sometimes I stream and drink from it, but God, 6 o'clock, I better get this down. I don't like cold coffee from the bottom of the pot. Anyway, that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, please. I'd like to have more subscribers. I think I have 50. 50. Am I up to 50 yet? Still nobody watching. Probably nobody's going to watch this. Maybe they will. I bounced on and off a couple of times. I have 81 videos now. Hooray! Where's my channel? I have 50 subscribers. I gained 2 from streaming with Adam. So, god damn, there I go again. Adam, fuck you. All right, there. Is that better? Nah, not gonna make a difference. He doesn't care. I actually think he's a decent person. I just think that he is wrong at times. But then again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to like him. I like Jordan Peterson. I think he's wrong about most of his stuff about religion. I think that very quick thing I thought of about Jordan Peterson that I like him. I think he's a person with the right attitude and some right ideas. But I think that his explanation or his expositions on religion basically amount to this very complex system, trying to make sense of a very complex system, and basically all he's doing is replacing the wording of one complex system with the wording of another complex system. He's adding a layer of complexity on top of something that's already very complex, and it's not making it any easier for people to understand. Dump it. Stop using metaphor to explain things that we don't need metaphor to explain. And keep the metaphor for the things that are best explained metaphorically. But understand that I am not religious. I don't believe in God. I am not a cultural Christian. Because Christianity is a thing. It is a set of characteristics that occur in America, for example. When I don't do those things that separate me from being a Christian versus me and a Hindu or a Buddhist, then I'm not acting like a Christian. I engage in some things that are secular Christian, like Christmas, but Halloween too. Halloween's not Christian, just in case you're wondering. Anyway, that's it. I've rambled on enough. I don't have anything else to say. I've been doing this for almost a freaking hour. There's only going to be like a 30-minute stream, and it turns out to be an hour stream. Terribly sorry about going on so long. Goodbye, and hello.